Go online. All right, cool. So hi everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Marley. I'm really excited to be back at Hatfield and to chat about networking today. Um, I have some slides to present and talk about. They're very simple. I feel like what I've put on these slides are just kind of very basic talking points. I am very happy for this to be more of a discussion for y'all to ask questions or insert your own experiences or ideas. I do not just need to stand up here and talk at you. So please feel free to interrupt me. Please feel free to ask any questions. These are just everything I've put on these slides is just stuff that I talk to people about all the time. So I've never actually given a formal presentation about networking. I think it should be more of a conversation. So please feel free to interrupt, ask any questions, anything like that. For those of you who I haven't met, my name is Marley Parker. I am a freelance photographer, videographer, and science writer, and I specialize in documenting oceanographic research expeditions. So a couple times a year, go out to sea for weeks, sometimes months at a time to photograph and film and interview scientists who are doing deep sea research. It is a really, really cool job. I have been all over the world, from Antarctica to the Caribbean to the middle of the Pacific, worked on a lot of different vessels with a lot of different cool people. Pretty phenomenal job. And whenever I talk about my work and give these types of presentations, I always get one of the first questions is, how did you get into this? How did you get connected with these types of scientists doing this work? How do you get these contracts? How do you get to do this for a living? And the answer to any variation of that question is always, it's just the people I know and the people that I've met over the course of my work. People ask if I apply for things or if I write grants or submit stuff. It's really just about all of the opportunities that I've gotten over the years have come from word of mouth, like someone I worked with on a boat recommended me to one of their colleagues directly, or someone that I've worked with before hires me again to work with them again. So I really can't stress enough how important just people have been to me having this really fun, fulfilling career. Um, and I think that kind of introduces this idea of, why do we need to think intentionally and critically about our professional networking? I think a lot of times people focus on networking when they're applying for jobs, or if someone is a student that's about to graduate, then they're like, I got to do some networking. Or if you know that you're about to be, in a career transition, then you want to be networking. I personally think that it's really, really important to think about your professional network, your professional connections throughout your career, whether or not you're looking for a job, whether or not you're applying for stuff or looking for a new opportunity. I think that having a really strong network of people around you in your professional life just gives you a lot more, creativity, meaning, places to, go for support, to work through challenges, to figure out, new ideas. There are so many ways and reasons to have good people around you, even if you're not actively applying for jobs. Um, I think this quote from James Clear kind of sums that up really well. I think, when we think about relationships in our lives, a lot of us think of, our romantic relationships, our friendships. But I think putting a lot of time and thought and intention into our professional relationships is just as important, because we spend most of our lives working. And again, being able to find meaningful work and work that makes us feel fulfilled and valued is really about the relationships and the people that we're working with. And to that end, I really love this little mantra of finding your tribes. Again, I think we all have our own personal tribes of people, your immediate family, your best friends from college that you still keep in touch with, maybe your book club or your, whatever, daughter, sister, brother, all of our people. But I think it's just as important to find your tribe in your professional world and find multiple tribes if you can. So in my work, in my life, these are all organizations that I've worked for over the past few years. I've done a couple different contracts and projects with each of these places, but that's not why I've listed them here. I've listed these organizations specifically because at each one of these organizations, I have not just a person I know, not just a professional contact. I have multiple people at each of these organizations that I feel really comfortable with, that I can go to if I have an idea, if I have a problem I'm working through. There are people at each of these organizations I could call or text them any time of day and be like, hey, I've got this thing I'm working on. I really need some support or feedback or insight. And I think that's pretty incredible. Like, these are not all the organizations I've worked for. These are just a select handful, but I put these on here because I've got people that I really trust and love and care about at these organizations. And I think, especially because I'm a full-time freelancer and I just do contract work, I don't have a home institution. Having tribes of people at these different organizations that will support me and help me with my career is just really, really meaningful and really important. Uh, and this is just another great quote that kind of speaks to the value of having these tribes, again, in our personal lives, but also really in our professional lives. Mariana, the book we were talking about last night, it's this. Really highly recommend this book for anybody who's looking to think about professional development stuff in a different way. All right. So, where do we begin when we're talking about networking? And again, feel free to jump in if you have questions or any ideas to contribute to this. But I think beginning, especially for folks, if you are early career, if you are a student that's about to graduate, it can feel very daunting and overwhelming to think like, I need to build my network, but how do I even start? And I think it's really, again, to just start with finding people who share your values and who do things the way you want to do things. So I think a lot of times, especially young people or early career people, can get caught up in name recognition and trying to find organizations. Like when I was a college student graduating from journalism school, I thought, if I don't go work for the New York Times, I'm a failure. Which is ridiculous. It's not really about working for the biggest name or, someone with a ton of recognition. It's about, finding people that you really jive with. So they share your values and they share your vibes. And this may sound kind of silly, but again, we spend so much of our lives working. Let's not spend it with people who have completely different values and personalities than we do. Cinnamon and I were talking just before this meeting about how much we love wearing sweatshirts. And I really love that I don't work for any organizations that are like, you have to be in business casual clothing every day. You're expected to wear these certain things. It's like, no, casual, you show up as yourself. You can be yourself with these people. You don't have to, dress up a certain way or act a certain way. I think working with people that you can be yourself with and have kind of similar vibes with is really important. All right, so then still, how do we find these people? How do we find, our people in the professional world? I think I've given this advice many, many times over the years, is just talking about it. So putting yourself out there to literally everyone. And this is especially important for people who are really early career and just getting started and trying to figure out where they want to be and what they want to do, is to just put yourself out there and tell everyone, your friends, your family, your neighbor, whoever, if you say, I'm really looking to get more connected with women who have started their own business because that's something I'm trying to do, or I'm really looking to get connected with people who work at Hatfield, or whatever. Just talk about it. Tell people at dinner parties, at coffee dates, at wherever you are, whatever you're doing, tell people what you're looking for, the kinds of people you're looking for, and how you're hoping to expand your network. For the online portion of stuff, obviously there's a lot of ways we can utilize the power of the internet to network and find people and find organizations we might want to work with. Social media is a very powerful tool. There's also so much distraction and so much crap on social media that I think we can kind of get a little caught up in just the circus of social media at times. So what I do, I do go and look at organizations that I want to work with. For example, right now I'm really trying to work with folks up in Alaska. So I have gone to different research organizations and institutes based in Alaska. I follow them on social media. But I think the more important thing I do and the more helpful thing is go to their website and subscribe to their newsletter. So I can get, a curated, they usually send out a newsletter once a month or something. I can get more, just instead of endlessly, mindlessly scrolling through social media, I can get a more curated kind of professional newsletter that gives me updates on what that organization is doing and when they might have opportunities for me. So I personally am just at a point where I'm a little sick of social media. It is a powerful tool. There is a lot there, but I've had a lot more luck recently with just going to websites and looking at different organizational newsletters. And also a lot of individual people send out newsletters now, myself included. So it's just kind of a way to cut through the noise and distraction of social media if you want to just go the email route. And on that note, it's also really important to think about not only how do I go out online and find people to connect with, but also how do I make it as easy as possible for people to connect with me. So the next couple of slides are going to be just the really brass tacks in the weeds, detailed stuff of like, this is how I think you should format your emails or your resume and that sort of stuff. So kind of getting into the weeds, but I do think these are important reminders, things to keep in mind. A lot of it might seem obvious, but it's just kind of helpful to have reminders and to talk about some of this stuff. So starting with email. The first one, is your email address anything other than your name? I bring this up because I just recently had an experience where I was working with a very talented, very smart, passionate young woman. She was a science communication fellow on one of my expeditions. I was very happy to be working with her. She was having some sort of technical issue, not being able to, get connected with her email. And I said, well, just, give me your email. I'll send it to you, whatever. What's your Gmail address? And she's like, well, I don't actually use Gmail that often. I usually use my Yahoo. And I'm like, all right, well, the Yahoo address isn't working. Give me your Gmail. And she's like, my Gmail address is I like Skittles 123. And I was like, huh, okay. Are you in middle school? Like, it's not that big a deal, but I just, it's one of those things where it's just, yeah, it's kind of embarrassing. It's kind of weird. Like, just use an email that's your name. And within that, if you are using your name or some variation of it, consider how long your email might be, or if you have a very complicated last name, how you might simplify that. It's helpful to not have an email address that's like 25, 30 characters long. I've had a couple times where I've tried to add folks to my listserv and went in to add this very long, complex email address, and then it didn't show up right. They'd written it down and I couldn't read their handwriting, or it was just a really complicated email address that's very easy to mess up and have a typo. So it's again, a little in the weeds thing, but just have a simple, easy to spell, easy to read email address will just save you some headache. Considering what your email signature looks like, and also how are your filters set? So making sure that emails from people that you'd like to connect with are not going into your spam folder. Just, doing some basic housekeeping around your email can make a big difference. Was there a question? Anybody? Nope. All right. LinkedIn. Who here uses LinkedIn? Sometimes, yeah. Even if you don't use it regularly, if you just kind of set it and leave it, it's still good for you to have your current work information. When was the last time you updated it? You don't have to do all this stuff I've listed up, like the featured content of getting recommendations from colleagues. If you are actively applying for jobs or actively looking to connect with more people, I do think it's helpful to have those things. But at least make sure it's up to date. Even if you're like, oh, I never use it, I haven't used it in 2 years. It's like, that's fine, but still somebody may find you on there or look for you on there. So making sure that it at least has your current job information is important. And then websites and portfolios. I'm just curious, does anyone in here have like a personal website of their own kind of work? So we don't have to go into this. This is a thing I could give a whole other workshop on, is just how to create and format and present a good website. But to the first point, even if you don't have your own website, it's always a good practice, good reminder to Google yourself every once in a while. See what pops up when people search your name. And then, yeah, if you do have your own website or portfolio online, I can answer any questions about that. There's a lot that kind of goes into making sure you have a good website, but we don't need to go into that if people don't have websites. And then the resume CV stuff is also another just whole bag of worms, but I keep and I'm going to show you all my resume in just a minute because it's a little bit different from a lot of people's, but I keep mine to one page. I'm really intentional about my formatting and color scheme, and I'm also really intentional about my language. So I'm a writer. I really want to make sure that my resume has consistent like verb tense and clear, concise, compelling language. So this is what my resume is on the left. Small because it's one page, but I got it all on there. This on the right is my cover letter for my fellowship when I came as the Laverne Weber visiting researcher last spring. I put both of these on here just so you could see my consistent branding, consistent color scheme, consistent formatting stuff. I have gotten a couple comments over the years when there's not many things I apply for. I often get contracts and jobs from word of mouth, but when I have applied for a few things, people have always commented like, your resume is really beautiful. I've never seen a resume like yours. So yeah, this is just kind of a different way to illustrate who you are. And I also really like how I've done my resume because it shows not just my experience and the different skill sets I have to offer, but like, a little bit of my personality and who I am and the type of work that I do. Okay. Networking events. The joy of walking into a room and not knowing anyone, putting on a name tag and trying to make conversations. I feel like when people think about networking and the kind of icky awkwardness of networking and meeting new people, this is one of the hardest things for folks, is to walk into a room not knowing anyone and trying to introduce yourself and start conversations. And I think the best advice I can give is just to embrace the awkwardness. I was at a conference, I think last year, and I was talking, it was me and two other people talking about whatever. And this fourth person walked up and said, I don't know anyone here, so I'm just going to step into your conversation. I hope that's okay. And I said, yeah, that's great. What's your name? We're talking about resumes or whatever we were talking about. And I think we've all been there. We've all been in that awkward, uncomfortable position of not knowing anyone in the room, not knowing how to start the conversation or how to just walk up and introduce yourself to someone. But I think if you just acknowledge the awkwardness and say, hey, I don't know anyone here. Do you mind if I come join you? Do you mind if I start talking to you? I think that's one of the best ways to do it because we've all been there. We've all felt awkward. We've all felt shy. And just acknowledging that. And then it's almost like an icebreaker in itself of like, well, this is awkward. I don't know anyone here. Can I talk to you? Like just lean into it. And then also at, in-person events, again, I think we're all still kind of coming out of the weirdness of COVID and everything being online. But when you do have the opportunity to go to in-person events, I think it's really helpful to bring whatever you have to offer to the event. So I as a photographer, if I'm going to a networking event, if I don't know anyone, I will always bring my camera and take some photos. And that's a great, valuable thing that I can share with the organizers of the event. It's also a great icebreaker, like, hey, can I take your picture? And that's just, something I can give to the folks who put the event together. So I've done that a couple times. There's other things you could do, whether it's, making a little social media post or just sending like a thoughtful thank you note to the organizers of the event. Anything you can do to kind of just share your value and contribute in some way is nice. If you are, whether you're at an event or, communicating with someone over email with a particular person who's doing the type of work that you want to be doing, I think it's really, really important to ask good, specific questions. So I've had a lot of experiences where especially younger folks have come up to me and said, Marley, your job sounds so awesome. I really want to do work like what you do. How do I get to be you? And I'm like, okay, thank you. But that's also like a very vague, broad type of question. So when someone asks me like, I want to do what you do, how do I do it? And I'm like, well, which part do you want to do? Do you want to learn professional photography skills? Do you want to learn how to fly drones? Do you want to learn how to get experience to work on research vessels? Like, I, like most professionals, do a lot of different types of things. So which thing do you want to learn about? If you can ask me a more specific, targeted question about which of my skill sets or experiences you're most interested in, then I can actually give you a helpful answer. So I think you will get better information and have better conversations if you ask specific questions. And then I think this should go without saying. I think most people are always, grateful and thankful and, say thank you to folks who share their expertise and share their time with you. The second point, always follow up. I've had a couple instances now where some person has reached out to me through a mutual colleague or whatever, and they say, hey, Marley, I saw your work. I saw your website. What you do is amazing. I really want to talk to you and learn from you about what you do. Can we set up a Zoom meeting? And, I don't know this person at all, but I always try to, make it work. So I'll email them back and say, thanks so much for reaching out. I'm happy to meet with you and talk about some career stuff. My schedule's kind of crazy because I travel a lot, but here are dates and times I'm available. Here's the time zone I'm in. I give them all this information and then they just never email me back. Radio silence. And that's happened multiple times. And I've talked to a few colleagues of mine who have also had similar experiences of someone reaches out all excited and then they don't actually follow up. So if you're going to reach out to someone to, really seek out their experience and their expertise, don't leave them hanging. Don't, have someone try to schedule with you and then you just never respond. I think that's very unprofessional. So I don't think any of you would do that, but it's a thing that's happened to me a couple of times. So just be respectful of folks and their time and always, follow up as promptly as possible. And then kind of my final thought, this is one of my mantras, something I say all the time when people ask me about my expedition work and what's the coolest place you've been or what's the coolest expedition you've been on. For me, it's really not about where I am or even what I'm doing. It's about who I'm working with. I feel like people are really, like I said at the beginning, really the key to any meaningful, interesting, and fun and fulfilling experience. It's about who you're working with. And yeah, finding your tribes to be able to do that. So that's kind of my little spiel. I'm happy to talk more about any of this stuff. I have quite a few anecdotes and stories that go with some of these little mantras and mentalities that I've shared. So if y'all are curious, I can talk more about my experience or hear about some of yours. Maybe don't be shy. Ask good questions.
Folks online, you can either put questions into the chat or you can raise your hand and we'll call on you and unmute. For folks in the room, if you could use this mic, it makes it easier for folks online to engage. We've got a lot of folks there. So help me out a little bit. We'll just pass this around.
Sorry, I actually just wanted to ask, what was the book that you had recommended in the beginning?
Yeah, it's called Tiny Experiments,
Okay.
and it's by Anne, her last name's kind of weird. Lauren Huff, I think. I can pull it up. I can go back to that slide. Hold on. It's a Anne Lauren LeConf. Yeah. It's a really good book. I just read it 2 months ago, but I have subscribed to her newsletter for a long time. So she runs a website called Ness Labs, Ness, which I highly recommend checking out. She is actually a neuroscientist by training. So she incorporates neuroscience into productivity and workflows and thinking about, setting goals and achieving your goals and thinking about how you work best and creativity and all of these different things, and kind of the neuroscience behind each of those. Really, really fascinating, really easy to read. And as Mariana and I were discussing last night, she talks a lot about how in most chats about career paths and about opportunities and jobs, it's this very linear trajectory of like, you have to get this job and achieve this, and then move on to the next thing, and then climb the ladder up to the pinnacle of success, and this very linear mindset of setting goals and achieving what you want to achieve. And she kind of just tosses that out the window. And instead of setting these big, ambitious goals and these milestones that everyone has to reach, she encourages folks to just try a new slight, experiment or variation of something. So try doing something a new way. Try writing for 10 minutes every day for a week and see how that feels. Instead of being like, I need to write a book. I'm going to write a book in the next year. It's like, well, that's a really big, impossible goal if you just try to do that. But it's not impossible to write for 10 minutes a day. And then after a week or two, see if that routine works for you. And if it doesn't, adjust and just have the flexibility to kind of figure it out as you go. That's another one of my big mantras in the work that I do is just being adaptable and flexible and kind of figuring out what works and what doesn't work and not sticking to a very traditional linear path. That's not necessarily working for you. So yeah, highly recommend this book, and or her website has a lot of just if you're needing like a spark for your work life or career stuff, for your own personal creativity, a lot of really, really good information there. Yeah.
Okay, we have a question online. So great ideas. Could you coach a real introvert and ways to step out and broaden their network?
Yeah, it's hard. I'm a very extroverted person, so I do well working on ships and being with people. I mean, I would just reiterate what I said earlier, that if you do consider yourself to be highly introverted, it's all the more important to force yourself out of your comfort zone and to put yourself out there. And, I think just you learn best by doing something, and to kind of do that again and again and again. And, starting with the baby step of, well, I guess baby steps could be very different for different people, but, um, you know, doing something that's attainable, having coffee with a new acquaintance, or I don't know, whatever that first thing would be, and then building off of that. I have several shipmates who consider themselves to be highly introverted, and yet they work on ships in this very close, contained environment where you're around people all day, every day. So it is possible, even if you're a very introverted person, to be able to seek out cool opportunities and be around people. I don't know. Does anyone else in the room have advice or thoughts on how to come out of your shell if you're introverted? I'd love to hear other people's. thoughts on this?
As a not introvert myself, but I one of the most extroverted people you probably will ever meet, but I have been in uncomfortable situations where I find myself being a little bit more introverted. And I think perhaps going in with like either a list of mini goals or a list of specific questions, like I'm going to ask somebody these 3 questions. And that way you don't have to think on the fly so much. So you don't feel so much on the spot. And the other advice that I've gotten for tough conversations in general is like pausing before you enter that space. And one of the things was wire me for sound. That was a little mantra that I tell myself now. If I know I'm going into a tough conversation or something that might be a little stressful, I like sit in my car for a few seconds before I go in the room and I say, okay, wire me for sound. Anything could happen. Here I go. And just really emotionally, mentally prepare yourself before, so you're not just running in and feeling overwhelmed. And then, yeah, having those 2 or 3 questions, you know, you're going to ask everybody or people you run into. So you don't feel so on the spot to have to come up with something. That would be my suggestion.
I love that.
I'm retired. I don't have.
That doesn't mean you don't want to have cool people in your life.
I still do this stuff, but I think it's super important to not be afraid of being misunderstood or failure or rejection. Don't be afraid of that. It'll happen. And so just be prepared. It'll happen. And it's okay. It happens to us all. And then the other thing is, in an interaction, it's super helpful to yourself to kind of know what it is that you want.
Yeah.
So go into this thing as best as you can, and you don't have to worry about being able to say it in the right words and right sentences, but as long as you're pretty clear to yourself what you want, then you can just struggle with it. And if it doesn't work out, just go on. And so people submit papers, they get rejected, they get bad grades, they don't succeed at something. It doesn't really matter. What really matters is, what do you want and how do you get it?
And that there are so many different paths, kind of going back to this book, it's something this author talks about a lot as well. There's not just that people get honed in on one opportunity and this one thing. And I applied for this one fellowship or grant and I didn't get it. So now everything's not going to work out. And it's like, there's a lot of other opportunities out there. You just have to keep an open mind and look for them. Yeah.
There's also some people that are just easier to be around for introverts. In my head, I'll classify people as like high energy, medium, low energy in terms of like how many spoons it takes to like work with them or interact with them and things like that. So sometimes like a lot of low energy people is totally fine, but like a couple high energy people would be difficult to like maintain extended period of time relationships with, for example, being stuck on a boat with them.
Right.
So kind of taking that into consideration before making big decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we have any other online questions right now?
Yeah. Marley, can you ask
A question?
No, tell them that they can.
Oh, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat.
Some of the stuff that we're talking about, especially, for if you're really introverted and get nervous with being around new people or meeting people for the first time, I think something I've noticed a lot over the years is when people are introducing themselves and meeting new people, I think all of us are often so focused on ourselves and like how and if I'm making a good first impression. Like, how many times have any of you been introduced to someone or introduced yourself to someone and you immediately forget that person's name? And it's because all of us. It's because a lot of times we're so focused on like, okay, do I sound okay? Do I look okay? Like, I want to play it cool and not be awkward and like, hey, I'm Marley. It's so nice to meet you. And then they tell me their name and it's gone, and it's just because I'm in my own head and my own insecurity of how I appear, instead of actually taking a pause, listening, with intention to this person I've just met and remembering their name. So, we all are very aware and can feel insecure and awkward in our own selves. But just remembering that everybody feels that way and it's okay. And I really like what you said, Mariana, about just pausing and taking a beat. And a lot of times now when I meet someone, hey, I'm Marley, so nice to meet you. What's your name? And then I will say that person's name immediately. Oh, your name's Mariana. Awesome. So nice to meet you, Mariana. It's really great to whatever. So yeah, I don't know, just another thought when it comes to the embracing the awkward stuff, leaning into it.
All right, a question online. What are good ways to advertise yourself in a field that might not be the same as your educational or previous background?
Well, there are lots of ways to advertise yourself. Whether you're working in your official, field or background or not. I don't know. I mean, my first thought is what I said earlier is to just talk about it, put it out there if you're not sure where to begin, or if you're making a career pivot, if you've been working in marine biology forever and now you want to pivot into doing communications work, and you're not sure where to begin or how to advertise that. The best thing to do is to just start talking about it with people. And I think the more that you start to talk about what you want to do, the more comfortable you'll start to feel with this like new idea. And also the more people you talk to about it, the more potential connections you can make. Because you never know when you talk about this, career pivot you're trying to make with your neighbor who doesn't work in that field, doesn't know anything about it, but their cousin's husband does, there's always some random connection of folks who maybe that person you're talking with doesn't do that, but they know someone who does, especially in a community like this. I think there's always, people who know people doing the type of thing you want to be doing. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of my first thought. I don't know if anyone else has stuff to add to that or if anybody has experience with doing that sort of thing. Yeah.
If you can make it to the stage of an interview while you're looking for jobs or grad schools or positions or anything like that, I found it really useful when I don't get it, since I spent so much time with that person and they know what I want to do and what I've done, to ask them if they know anyone that I should apply to or look into. That's actually how I found my grad student advisor, because I interviewed with Dr. Crowder out at Stanford, but he chose someone else. And so he recommended Selena, who had been his student, but she was becoming department head. And so she recommended the two new incoming faculty in the department. Here I am 7 years later.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that.
One thing I've observed in my own career path over the last 20 plus years is that, like, sometimes the transition, it's difficult to explain without like reverting to your sort of core values. So it may be that the work is a little different, or what we're going to be doing in the future is a new set of skills and a new community. But finding the connection to what was, my initial values that got me into the work that I was doing, and how that passes through, helped me speak more compelling in those transition periods. Does that make sense?
I was just want to ask, you mentioned making your work as accessible as possible. Do you have any other recommendations for how to do that? If it's like a personal website, let's say, how would you make it so if you were to look up, my name, how would I make that be the first search result, or make it easier for people to find work?
Yeah. Search engine optimization. SEO is your best friend. When I started, so I had a full-time job at a research university. I left that job to start my own business and become a full-time freelancer specializing in ocean science stuff. So I already had a website, but it wasn't great, and I needed it to, be the first thing that popped up when people Googled my name. So I just worked with a good friend of mine who is literally an IT director, and she just did some wizarding magic to make sure that my website was the first thing that popped up when people Googled me. And then Yeah, and then now if you Google me, it's a whole bunch of expeditions I've been a part of, projects I've been a part of. My photos were published in the New York Times this summer. It's very exciting. So now that's a thing. So yeah, my advice is to get with a friend who knows IT stuff better than I do. There's also, I work with an organization called the Association of Science Communicators, and they actually have an online course that is all about search engine optimization. If you really want to nerd out and get into it and really tinker with how all that works. But yeah, I don't know, that's kind of my short answer to that. Yeah.
Great presentation.
Thanks.
I had a question about, so when you're sending an initial email to someone that you might be interested in collaborating with or working with, besides the resume and the link to your LinkedIn, what other information would you say would stand out for someone to respond to versus?
Yeah. So like the cold email thing, I think that's great, including your information. I would also really do your research ahead of time on that person you're reaching out to. So I can always tell when someone reaches out to me whether or not they've looked at my website and whether or not they've taken at least a couple of minutes to familiarize themselves with my work. And then if they have, they can ask a lot more informed, specific, interesting questions of what they want to learn from me or what they're interested in knowing more about. So, yeah, if you're going to take the time to send somebody your resume and your LinkedIn and everything else, also take the time to look at whatever they have online, familiarize yourself with their work, and say, I'm really interested in working with you on this particular project that you have listed on your website. I'm interested in it because it involves working with, this population of people that I also have experience working with, or whatever it is. But again, be specific, ask questions that are pertinent and specific to that. And that just shows somebody that you're not just like, I don't know. I was talking to a scientist one time, a whale researcher, and he's like, yeah, I get 200 emails a day from students that are just like, I want to work with you because I love dolphins. And it's like, okay, you're going to need to stand out a little bit from the crowd. So yeah, again, just kind of going back to the specific questions and doing your research and homework ahead of time. It's not enough to just be like, hey, this is me, this is everything I do. You need to really demonstrate how and why you are the right fit for that particular pairing or project. Does that make sense? Okay.
Questions online, drop them in the chat. One question that an intern previously had at another networking talk was about how superficial it felt to network and then also maintain those connections and not make it about just like, hi, I want to meet you because you can get me places. And they took it very, very literally. And so how do you balance between that give and take of networking in a professional environment and also the honesty and the genuine connection with people and that, if you could kind of touch on that maybe.
Yeah, definitely. I was actually just to kind of get in this headspace this morning to talk about all this stuff. I was watching a TED talk about networking and how it can, a lot of people do feel kind of icky and superficial and like I'm just networking in order to make a connection to get a job. And if that's the mentality that you have, then it is going to feel really icky and superficial. But if you go into it with this idea, some of the ideas I've been talking about of finding not just somebody that might lead to a job, but finding people who will like feed your soul and like help you cultivate your creativity and help you think differently about what you're working on and help you find cool opportunities or just think differently or just have a good conversation and bounce ideas off of. If if you're only in it to get a job that will pay you more money, then it's going to feel icky and superficial. If you go into networking and meeting people and connecting with people in a genuine way because you want to be the best version of yourself and you also want to offer what you have to give to other people, then it's going to feel a lot more, intentional and meaningful. And again, I think that kind of goes back to this quote from James Clear about, we're all human and we're all just trying to figure out life and figure out work and figure out how to have a meaningful existence during our time on this planet. And so much of that is derived from the people we know and the people that enter our lives along the way. So, yeah, I think what it really comes down to is approaching professional networking with a more kind of holistic mindset of this is not just because I need to find a job that pays me more money. If you can go into it with the attitude of I just want to have more cool people in my life and benefit from that, and also, give back to them. And I do a ton of these types of talks and workshops and presentations because when I was starting out as a full-time freelancer, starting my own business for the first time, I had no idea what I was doing. And I was very insecure and very terrified and just like, I don't know how to be a full-time freelance science communicator and how to like make my website look good and how to get connected with the right people and how to do all these things. I just had to figure it out through a lot of trial and error. And I certainly haven't figured out everything. I'll be figuring it out for the rest of my life, but I have learned a lot of stuff along the way. And what I have learned, I try to make every effort to share with people in this type of setting and capacity as often as I can, in hopes that someone like me will get something out of it and benefit from it. And that's just, I don't know, call it good karma or call it passing it on or lift as you climb. I mean, there's a lot of little titles you can put on that sort of stuff. But it feels good to help people out. It feels good to give people a leg up, to give people some guidance, to, give people the help and guidance that I didn't have when I was first starting out. So, yeah, that's my long, rambly answer to that. I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about that. I don't know if anyone wants to add to that or build on that at all. Yeah, I think networking definitely does not have to be a surface level, superficial thing. Definitely be a more meaningful thing. Certainly has been for me. Anyone else? Well, if we don't have any more questions, we can go ahead and wrap up. Or if people want to hang out afterwards and chat one-on-one, that's fine too. Whatever works.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks everyone online for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Oh, wow. Great. And about that many in the room? Yeah. Oh. Hey, Finley. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Oh, actually, let me, I meant to put my email address up there. Let me just. Yeah. Like the whole story. Yeah. Yeah, send me an email and, yeah.